I had that idea in dental school. I basically was like, I'm just going to go where there's a good opportunity, build my first practice, and then, after a year, I'll get a second, and I'll basically continue to do that. And I enjoy management, and so I'll continue to do that. If you're stuck and your associate is gone, are you okay working longer extra hours to kind of make up for this until you can find another one? I started off in dental school, probably like several others of my generation, with the idea of like, oh, okay, like there's this opportunity out there with private equity and DSOs where you can basically build up a clump of practices and sell them at a high multiple and have your walk away money. Sicker than your average, sicker than your average. Call me when you want, call me when you need. Call me in the morning, sicker than your average, sicker than your average. Welcome back to round 2. Again, myself, Dr. Derek Williams with the Lifestyle Practice Podcast. And again, I've got Dr. Chad Christiansen. Chad, appreciate you coming back for round 2 and being able to kind of talk through a different subset. I think our last episode and talking through vision was a lot of fun. So appreciate you being back again.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to do it again. Like I said, the more and more I incorporate these things into my life, the more I appreciate them and love talking about them and sharing them. And I'm excited to keep it going and keep the wheels turning for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is kind of a side note, but it is interesting to me that as I grow and develop certain things about myself or characteristics, that if I can talk about them to other people, even journaling, but different things like that help to continue the growth process and help you to like really digest and embody those ideas. So I like that you pointed that out.
Yeah, no, it's nice. It's nice to not have to bottle it all up. Sometimes I try and talk with my wife about all this stuff, and I don't know what she's getting out of it, but not a lot. So it's nice to have peers and be able to kind of again, talk about these ideas and how they influence our lives and what we do as dentists. So pretty cool.
Yes. So today we are basically kind of transitioning from our conversation last time was all about vision. If any of you are listening and you have not listened to our episode that we recorded previously about vision and developing this, go back and listen to that first, because that's going to be foundational to what we're talking about today. Today we are going to address a specific question that you have gone through significantly, Chad, and that I go through a lot with a lot of different clients. And that question is basically when and this is a great position for dentists to be in, but to have the opportunity where you have enough demand in your practice that if you want to, you can scale and you can grow and you can get bigger, or you can kind of stay at your same size, you can raise fees, different things like that. So kind of like the typical question that we're looking at is, do I want to stay solo, or do I want to expand, bring in associates, possible other locations, stuff like that. That's kind of the frame for today's episode in discussing and talking through that. And it all relates back to our previous conversation with vision and what that looks like. So, Chad, maybe we kind of have like a few main points that we're going to talk through in your specific scenario and what a lot of dentists go through. But I'm going to hand it off to you and kind of let you start off with kind of what that was like for you in the beginning when you kind of first realized that you may have that opportunity. That you were kind of faced with that fork in the road, or even what it was like in your original 3-op practice before you ever got to that point.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's super common. I think, as we, you know, start to understand our potential and start to have that vision like we talked about, you can start recognizing the possibilities and, the directions you can take your practice, and again, what kind of growth you can achieve, you know what I mean? And I think that was the beginning, is when I was in that little office in my 3-op practice. All of a sudden we were growing. We were growing a lot, just from minor tweaks and changes and different changes in mindset and things like that, able to grow that practice. And yeah, I got to the opportunity where I had to make some decisions like, hey, do I, do I like this growth? Do I want to keep growing? What's going to be the next step? And whether that was going to be, well, and it was kind of hard because of course in this smaller practice, I didn't really have the space or the capacity to, you know, physically grow or hire more people. And so, yeah, no, that was kind of my first, um, that first time I was faced with that challenge, like, what do I do next and how do I do it? And so, yeah, no, I started looking for new spaces, started trying to find some real estate to move into. And that's kind of like I talked about on the previous episode when we decided that, you know what, we're just going to move out of the area. We're going to more or less kind of start over. The good news is I had grown a lot of value in the practice. So I was able to sell it and, put some money into my pocket to kind of move on to the next venture. And then, yeah, no, it was interesting because going to that next opportunity, trying to figure out like, well, how, what do I want to do here? Like, how big do I want this practice to be? What kind of dentistry do I want to do? Do I want to have associates at some point? Like trying to figure out what the future is going to look like. And again, we talked about that quite a bit last time, but yeah, like what's the vision here? Like what am I trying to accomplish? And and then I think that's kind of what we're talking about today is some of that self-reflection, trying to understand, what kind of dentistry do I like to do, or what kind of leadership role do I want to have in my practice? Because of course, when I was in my smaller, 3-op practice, I had to lead a team of, 3 employees, and not super difficult, not a lot of drama there. Of course, there always is anywhere you go, but yeah, trying to be develop as a leader and develop my team and team trainings and things like that. I'm not necessarily super involved that way. I mean, we did all those things which contributed to our growth, but then as I started kind of analyzing the prospects in front of me, how's my role in my practice going to change? What kind of leader am I going to be? And honestly, it was a little difficult for me to try and gauge that out, considering I had never done that before. I mean, did you have times like that, Derek? I know you kind of expanded your office and you had some growth, but what kind of self reflection did you do as you kind of face some of those opportunities for growth?
Yeah, it's interesting. So for me, like some listeners may have heard me share this before, but I kind of like I started off in dental school, probably like several others of my generation, with the idea of like, oh, okay, like there's this opportunity out there with private equity and DSOs where you can basically build up a clump of practices and sell them at a high multiple and have your walk away money essentially. And so I had that idea in dental school. I basically was like, I'm just going to go where there's a good opportunity, build my first practice, and then after a year I'll get a second, and I'll basically continue to do that. And I enjoy management, and so I'll continue to do that. Well, the I after a year in practice, I went to 3 days a week, and my income continued to increase. It led to new opportunities. I was able to start investing in real estate. It led to the opportunity for me to become a coach with TLP, and so I got to this point where I was like, oh, okay, I could purchase a second practice. Like, I'm here. Um, but when I kind of weighed out the pros and cons, I just felt like, man, there's so much juice coming from this squeeze from my one practice. I'm not sure that I want to take on a second, and to take to risk that it requires more of my time, and then I have less family time. If my associate leaves, I'm kind of stuck. And so as I kind of wade through the pros and cons, um, I just wasn't it just wasn't worth the squeeze. I was so happy with my lifestyle and the trajectory that I was on, that I was still going to be able to meet my financial goals in the timeline that I wanted to without needing other locations. Even later on, as I had the opportunity, well, I could expand my building and bring on I could bring on an associate, expand again. Uh, I just every time that I would think through that scenario, um, it didn't fit. It didn't match up with, what I would have to give. And so I think that's kind of what you're going through, or that you've kind of laid out in this episode for, what kind of questions we can ask ourselves to see, to figure out, is that the direction that a dentist should go, or should they stay solo?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the key to what you just said, Derek, is those moments of reflection where you were able to kind of analyze your situation, be able to see where you are, see kind of what you're accomplishing, where you're headed, and then yeah, no, kind of recognizing some of the risk or some of the responsibilities or what would be different about your practice if you took it a different direction. So, and I think, yeah, and I think you're right. I think, like you said, kind of our generation, there was a lot of that multi-practice going on, a lot of, shiny objects going around where, you know, this is the way to do it. This is where the money's at, that kind of a thing. And I think in a lot of ways, a lot of practice owners, they, again, they go down a path, not necessarily because they feel like that's what they want, but that's, the next shiny object, I guess. And I guess, yeah, that's kind of the important thing that I've, more or less tried to learn or tried to get better at over my career is, recognizing, who am I really? What kind of task do I like? What do I truly enjoy about dentistry? What do I like about my days when I go into the office? And then what makes my days really bad? And I assume that's kind of what you alluded to when you talked about, self-reflection. Like, what do you like about your work schedule? What do you like about your week? What do you like about the procedures you do? What kind of problems are you asking for? Because I think that's the biggest thing is, we're kind of more or less choosing our problems, choosing the hard things that we do in our practice, because it's work, right? We kind of go through and develop our practices and try and help it reach our goals and our lifestyles. But more or less having the opportunity to choose what kind of tasks you do is pretty important. And I think, as you said, there's kind of that distinguishing factor between, do you want to be a manager, or do you want to continue to have the power in your hands to, do the production and to have the success riding on you, as opposed to a lot of the success, more or less riding on others and your ability to lead and inspire others.
So talk about that. Talk about that in your situation, like as you so yeah, your first practice, 3 ops, small, didn't really have that opportunity to even expand, to really capitalize on what you wanted. You felt like you could get out of it with you being the only doctor in place. So you buy another a different practice that's bigger. Was it 6 operatories?
Started at 5. Yeah.
Okay, so um, 5 gives you the chance where you can probably maximize that space with just you working. So how did you think through that with those questions that you were just talking about? What were your specific thoughts about yourself as you made that decision to continue to scale up?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I wish that I had, an episode like this to draw from when making those decisions, because I was still super naive. I went and, bought this practice, had 5 operatories, so a little bit bigger. We had 2 hygienists, 2 assistants, still just one person up front and, at the front desk. And we were just busy, just super busy, super blessed. I walked into the situation just after COVID, or during COVID, and things started kind of picking up and ramping up again. And, again, working with you, Derek, minor tweaks, kind of changing the schedule, trying to, change some of the focus. I mean, I was just super busy, just slammed all the time, plenty of dentistry to do, no appointments, we were booked out, just a long, long time. And I remember, and of course that definitely had its perks, had its benefits. I was, bringing home more money than I had ever imagined. You know what I mean? I was thrilled with my income and just some of the possibilities, that brought to me and the opportunities. And, but something we talked about, Derek, is we talked a little bit about the sustainability of where I was. And I mean, I was just physically and mentally exhausted by the end of the day. I was doing everything, right? I was doing all of the dentistry, all of the managerial things, running this whole ship by myself, which is, kind of the typical way a practice owner does it in this size of a practice. But I remember just kind of thinking that, like, I don't know how long I can keep this up. I don't know how long I'll be able to, despite how good the money is, how long, this is going to be my situation. And again, I wish I had had a little more self reflection, but it was at that point I decided to hire an associate, because we had the opportunity to build out two more operatories. So we went from 5 to 7, and I decided, well, hey, if I can bring in another doctor, make this easier on me, and hopefully make the same kind of money, like, why not, right? That sounds great. Of course, it never quite works out that way. Kind of like you alluded to. I wish I'd have had a little bit more of the self reflection to understand, like, well, what are you asking for when you bring on an associate? And we had that conversation. I remember, Derek, in some of our calls. What if he leaves? What if he's not necessarily the same clinician that you are? What if all these different variables which you have to think about. And then of course there was the part where I had to build out the infrastructure of the office. I had to hire more employees. We needed, to make it worth it, we needed another hygienist. We needed, more assistants. We needed another front desk as we, increased that volume. And so all of a sudden, not only did I bring on this other doctor that, I had no idea who this person was, but we, doubled our staff and kind of doubled I took out another loan to pay for these other operatories. And so all of a sudden I had set myself up to be, you know, do completely different things in this office compared to what I had been doing. I wasn't the guy that could just kind of show up and do a ton of dentistry and go home anymore. All of a sudden I was the guy, so I did hire an associate. I hired an associate. All of a sudden I was the guy like teaching this associate things and setting aside time to be a mentor to him, and then training my new employees and, hiring new employees. And then of course some of the employees don't stick around that much. And so, I had to rehire employees, had to, hire a front desk, or, tried to hire an office manager. And again, I, very minimal experience with front office duties, trying to figure out how I'm supposed to, train this office manager and all of the front office, things that I, be honest with you, didn't know a lot about. So all of a sudden my job as a dentist was completely different. I'm sitting, going home at night studying, like, insurance and things like that not, again, I would reflect and be like, is this what I wanted? Is this, why did I do this? And it was interesting, and it brought on a lot of challenges. And again, I'm hoping that, before someone else does it like me, that they can maybe have a little bit more foresight, like maybe you had, Derek, when you were kind of deciding on your correct path.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times, I mean, this, like I said, this is something that I talk through a lot with different clients, and there's no one right answer. Everybody's different, and if you can kind of think through and ask those questions, it's really interesting because one thing that I've been learning in the last year is, for a long time, I've made very strategic and analytical decisions. And one thing that I am learning is to make decisions based more just on a feeling. And I've done that. So actually, in my last, in this last, I had a, let's edit that part out real quick. I had a coaching call recently with a client where we were kind of talking through this, and he's kind of like all this different analysis and stuff, which is good. It's good to consider all of those things. But, I just said, okay, if you just take away all of that stuff, shelf it, just put it on the shelf for a little bit. And now just think, like, if you just think about your feelings, which one feels the best to you? Which option do you just like kind of intuitively? And at that point, he just got a lot of clarity, and he was like, oh, well, that's pretty obvious because I would do this because of this. And, anyway, that was kind of a fun realization for me, how we can kind of think of things in different terms, and how allow us to have a little bit of clarity in making decisions. But what I wanted to point out in your scenario and in talking through this is that it's pretty challenging to expand operatories, expand staff, bring on an associate, and then to go and try and take that back, right? Like, if you go that direction and then you decide, oh, I actually don't like this, I just want to be a solo doc, that's pretty challenging. I mean, you're gonna have to be firing staff. If you built out the operatories and you took on a loan because of that, it kind of forces you to have a higher production. And so it can make you feel a little bit trapped. So it is very important to kind of think through those questions and say, okay, kind of like we did together when it was just you and you were making the decision to bring on an associate. Hey, let's have the tough questions. Like, if you're stuck and your associate is gone, are you okay working longer extra hours to kind of make up for this until you can find another one? Those kinds of things. If we can consider the worst case scenario and we're still okay with that, then that gives us a pretty good indication, like, oh, okay, this may be a good fit and is the direction that we want to go. So anyway, just quick, just good to recognize the ability. If you're solo, you can always expand. For the most part, you can always expand hours, operatories, staff. You can always go that direction, but it's much more difficult once you've expanded to then go back the other direction.
For sure. And I mean, and yeah, no, perfect segue there, Derek, because that's kind of where I ended up. My associate was there for about a year and then he left, decided he was going to go and pursue other opportunities. And honestly, it was great. You know what I mean? I was excited for him. He was a great doctor, and obviously he wanted, to be more than just an associate with me. And so, and honestly, and I guess during that year, it was tough. It was tough for me. That was probably one of the tougher years of my, career to this point. Again, it had taken on, a lot more responsibilities that I wasn't familiar with, a lot more overhead, just a lot more pressure, right? A lot more pressure to perform and to, like you said, kind of grow into what I had built and kind of the commitment I had made. And, there were some other, external factors that weren't helpful. But yeah, when my associate left, I mean, to be specific with the story, it was pretty casual. Like, we were just in the back in our back office there, and he looks at me and says, "Well, I have another job." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, and to be honest, in that moment, I almost felt relief, which was kind of a big indicator to me, which was kind of strange. Like, okay, maybe I don't have to deal with all this anymore. You know what I mean? It was kind of, because I'll be honest, my income had gone down. We kind of ran into that scenario where I was feeding him and we had not grown, enough to make it worth having the two doctors there, despite what I was trying to do and what we were working through. It just wasn't coming as easily or as quickly as I was hoping it would. And so, yeah, when he said he was leaving, I was like, well, maybe that's for the best. But again, I was left holding all these pieces, you know what I mean? More staff, more overhead. So, I really kind of had to again go to that, that moment where, like, well, what do I do now? Do I kind of contract and go through all the pain that you just, talked about, Derek? Do I, go that direction? Or do I forge ahead and try and find, the next associate and just hope it's better? You know what I mean? And again, hopefully be a little more intentional, a little more strategic with what I had learned to make sure that we didn't, repeat the same scenario again. And so, yeah, no, I'll be honest. I toyed with that decision for a long time. Like, do I go back to what I was familiar with, where I was making tons of money and it was more, I guess, easier in some ways, or do I continue down the path of, what I had built the foundation for and really try and build that out to fruition? Because we had never gotten to the point where I felt like it was worth it, and we were, doing what I felt like was possible. I mean, this is a little unique, but again, this is the opportunity that presented itself. My younger brother graduated dental school and was looking for a place to be, kind of more or less at the same time period. And sometimes I wonder, like, would I have gone back if my brother hadn't, been available? But I, told my brother, like, hey, I've got this two doctor practice. I've built out these things, and so there's space and work for you to do. So I hired my brother as my next associate. And I know not everybody can do that or have somebody that they might innately trust or, would innately know is committed to their process. But, we decided to keep growing, decided to keep building. And honestly, it's been the right decision for us because he's been, a great associate. And honestly, he's my brother and I love him, but I, I'm pretty sure another associate could do more or less what he is doing, you know what I mean? Which is nice. And we structured things a little bit differently to make it, again, trying to, avoid some of the problems we ran into. But yeah, I've come to the realization that I do like the multi-doctor practice. I do like my responsibilities as the owner and the mentor and, the leader that has to be, someone that teaches and helps develop people as opposed to just the guy that does all the dentistry. And so, yeah, it's been a big deal. And yes, it's become worth it. I can honestly say that we're at a point now where, um, my income is great. My daily schedule is great. I have a lot of fulfillment, and I'm at a place now where I feel like I can breathe and relax. And again, it's still a lot of work, but and it's taken a lot of work to get to where we are, but it has definitely been worth it. And it definitely is worth it, as opposed to, I don't know what it would be like had I gone backwards, but I'm glad I kept going down the path I chose.
Yeah, I love that perspective, and that is. I remember, talking through that at the very beginning before you brought on an associate the first time and stuff. And talked about like, hey, I mean, so much of this model is dependent on the associate. If they're lower, they're not as great at diagnosing, treatment planning. They're uh, poor, poorer conversion with case acceptance. Like all of these things, if that's the case, they're going to have to require more patients to do the same amount of dentistry. And if they're slower on their schedule, like there's all these things that, if that does come about, then you could be taking a pay cut. It's possible that may provide some flexibility. So again, I think the best part is that you went into this kind of eyes wide open. You kind of knew all of these things, and so when we started to see that, where you uh, things didn't work out great with your first associate and with your income and stuff like that, you, like I said, you went into it eyes wide open. You knew that this was a possibility, and then when made that, when you had that opportunity again, like I remember going through that when you're like, well, I mean, associate's gone, I'm super busy, I'm making a ton of money again, and kind of that thought process, like, do I just ride this wave and like continue to work? But again, it continues to go back to those questions, the introspection about yourself. Like, do I enjoy what I'm doing? Is this sustainable? And you know, uh, continuing to ask those questions led to you saying, you know what? No, I do like that, and I think I can continue to push and make it work. And now you're in a position where the office continues to grow, and maybe this is a good time for you to talk a little bit about the last, what I would say, like 3 to 6 months, where you expanded associate, you're working towards 14 op practice, and then having a third dentist in the office. So in once you can kind of scale to that point, things start to get a little bit more manageable, right? It's kind of, they say, it's the most difficult going from one location to two, and then 2 to 3 gets a little bit easier. Like the more that you have systems in place, the more this scalability becomes achievable and manageable. So talk a little bit about like the last 6 months for you. What have been some of the best things as far as hiring, firing, training, having good systems in place that has made things more manageable from your perspective, being the owner of a larger practice?
Yeah, for sure. Because again, I mean, that's what we're talking about. Is my days look completely different now than they used to. You know what I mean? I'm still doing a lot of the dentistry. A lot of it's all produced by me. But again, there's a lot of tasks that I've taken on, and a lot of things that go into, and a lot of it's just people development. Um, because yeah, no, that's the key. I mean, I think the now that we've grown, and we brought on my brother, the new associate, um, things have gone way better. And I think the key moments, again, have honestly been finding and hiring the right people. And I think the biggest one is finding and hiring my current office manager. Um, yeah, no, I had a previous office manager, was not very good at helping me implement systems, and, kind of running the front office, different issues there. The more you scale and the more volume you have going through the practice, the more obvious your flaws are. You know what I mean? Things break a lot easier. Your systems break down. And I didn't really have someone to help me with that. I didn't really have, a lot of support when, well, this system's just not working anymore. Our collection policy is not working, or the way the scheduling is working is just not working the way, it should. I was trying to tackle all those things myself, and do all the other things I had going on. But now that I have an office manager that can, recognize those problems, they can help develop and create systems with me, that can help with training and people development and help with staff and HR issues. Yeah, that's a big deal. And then getting other employees, the right people in the right seats. Again, just if you can hire the right people, it makes all the world. At least that's how it has been for me, because I've got the support. I'm almost, I wouldn't say that I'm able to just show up and be an employee at my practice, but I've got team leads in place. I've got managers in place. I've got people that I trust, that I meet with on a consistent and regular basis, that I feel are on my team, and are able to take us down the trajectory that we're going to. And when things break, it's nice because I don't hear about all the problems. I still hear about a lot of the problems, but not every little decision and every little problem that needs addressed comes straight to me. There's a little bit of a hierarchy in place that makes it so those things can be addressed and more or less taken care of to some degree without me. Yeah, I mean, just recently we've hired, a couple more assistants, and I was more or less hands off with that process. It was nice. My manager and my team leads and those long term employees were able to find good employees and vet those employees, and they told me about them and kind of asked me like, can we hire this person? I guess, but I completely trusted them. I trust them and know that they were making the right decision, and I wasn't super involved with that. So that, I mean, again, that's, to me, that's kind of the goal, is to get somewhere where you have a team in place where you can um, focus on other things. So at this point, it's nice because I am more focused on developing my office manager and training and leading those team leads to help continue to grow in their capacity and their ability to do what they do. And it's nice because I can still do the dentistry I want to do in a sustainable way, and we're able to be profitable and continue to grow in that way. But again, it's completely different than it was when I was by myself, or even when I had the associate without the right people in place.
Yeah, let me I want to ask real quickly. So with because your office manager, I mean, to be honest, there's not a lot of times in my coaching with clients that we really are making a big emphasis and a push in an office manager, because a lot of times I would say probably 2/3 of the docs that I work with have smaller teams, and then 1/3 have probably larger teams, larger practices, multi doc offices. So the majority of the time, it's not a huge focus on the office manager, because a lot of times they're not a true office manager. In your situation, you have a more of a true office manager that is taking on a lot of those things and taking a lot of things off of your plate. So I want to ask the question. I think this is a common question in regards to training your office manager. What does this look like in actuality when you are trying to get your office manager to take on a lot of these roles and things that you want her to do? Is it Are you actually spending a lot of the time training on like the technicalities and the specifics of how you want things done? Do you spend time talking about vision with her, and then kind of depend on her to kind of like fill in the gaps? Is it both? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, that's been key. And she's been with us now for not quite a year, or yeah, it hasn't been that long. I mean, we're talking like 6, 8 months that she's been with us. And so, yeah, I mean, it's getting a little less, but yeah, at the very beginning, quite a bit of time devoted to sitting down with her. I, at least 1 or 2 days a week, I would kind of block out my first hour in the practice and go up and sit with her. And honestly, she didn't come from dental. So, that was kind of the other added barrier there, is just kind of getting her familiar with, dentistry in general, dental practice. But yeah, we would sit and go through, and those very first conversations, like you said, Derek, they were about vision. Like I kind of was trying to like spill all the things that were swirling in my head and try and like, put them in her head so that she could see the same things that I'm seeing, you know what I mean? And kind of recognize like, this is what we're trying to accomplish. This is kind of where we're trying to take the practice. This is the growth we're looking for. And then from there, yeah, I mean, you start breaking it down into steps. Like, these are the steps to profitability. This is the service that we provide. I mean, this is kind of a patient's journey from being someone out on the street in the town we live to someone that actually, gives us money for the services that we do, and how we can take each of those steps, effectively. And so walking through step by step by step, that patient experience, our different policies, our different systems that are in place to ensure a smooth transition for this patient moving through our practice, and then ensuring that that patient comes back and we continue to grow, those kinds of things. And it was fun kind of doing it, talking with somebody and helping somebody that, again, had no idea what a dental practice typically runs like. And again, I feel super blessed because the more I taught her and we talked about these things, it was nice because we didn't necessarily have to get into the super nitty gritty technicalities. She was able to kind of fill in the holes, and some of the more specific things. We had the resources for her to draw on to fill in those gaps so that she could again figure out the kind of the more super specific tasks. But yeah, no, quite a bit at the beginning, training her that this is kind of what we want our team to look like. This is how we develop our teams. We do reviews with our teams. This is what our HR situation should look like. So yeah, like I said, a lot of time at the beginning, and it's becoming a little bit less and a little bit less. I still meet with her at least once a week to kind of review where we're going. And at this point, it's nice because we're starting to get a little more specific. We've kind of been talking about our schedule and our days, and meeting daily goals, and kind of the things that go hand in hand with that, trying to help her be on my team, which is nice. And I don't even run huddles anymore. I don't even run our daily huddles. I've got the office manager, what I mean, that's able to kind of go in and talk with our team, and it's fun. We've been able to develop a little bit of respect, with the team and her. And so, yeah, I mean, they go to her with problems now. They go to her with ideas. They kind of go to her with more or less everything that doesn't have to come to me. It's nice to be able to have that infrastructure in place for sure. And that's the only reason that we're successful, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I'm reminded of what we talked about last episode, the chicken and the egg scenario, and that's a little bit of what I'm hearing when you're talking about training your office manager. There are some technicalities where you're training on specific things, and when you do that, it helps her to see like a bigger picture vision, the why, and those kinds of things. And then you can also vice versa. You can teach her about the why and the vision that you have, and then sometimes because she understands that bigger picture vision, then she can kind of fill in some of the gaps on her own. So yeah, I think it's great that you've taken the time to do that, and I think it's very important. Um, there's so many times when we hire a new employee and we just kind of hope that they'll just figure it out. And so, I think it's crucial what you've done to make it a priority to continue to spend time with her, and to continue to view it as an investment. The more that you can train her and help her to become a better manager, to understand how you envision things over time, the more that continues to take things off of your plate, and allow another person to come in and fill in all of those gaps, so that we get closer and closer to this idea of your time being more effective. So maybe probably getting close to wrapping things up. um, I think what one of the most fun parts of my experience in working with you is you continuing to develop your vision. We talked about this last episode, and I think um, to see you have a vision and to go and accomplish it and to get to where you want to be, and then to basically, like, again, start over. Okay, what's my new vision, and continue to kind of upscale and continue to grow in that way. And so, we've got like a 2 to 3 year timeline, even in the next 2 to 3 years, for what your goals and where you want to go. And that all of those things play into what do we do this year? What do we do this month? It's a process of reverse engineering. And so it's fun for me. I enjoy working with you because you're dedicated to that. And even in the last year, I've seen you. We were talking about this before we started recording. I was saying how it's been fun for me to witness that growth in you. How at the beginning it's like that 3-op practice, like that was your whole world, and there was things that were very intimidating about that. I remember one of those employees was a little bit challenging to work with, and now you're to the point where you have a lot more confidence. You've worked through training and building and growing in so many different ways, and so it's been a lot of fun for me to be a part of that process and to be able to see what that looks like. So I appreciate your energy and your commitment to your goals and where you want to be. I think you being willing to share that and kind of share what that looks like and what your journey has been like, I think is great for everyone else to see, myself included. So sincere thanks from me, Chad.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And again, a lot of this growth is come from you, Derek. So yeah, you've kind of held my hand this whole time and shown me what's possible, and help me make all these decisions. So no, it's been amazing. And so yeah, no, thank you for leading me to where I am today. And I mean, that's where all the value is. And I know we talked about this, just I've seen all that growth in myself and how cool that's been, and just kind of I'm a completely different person now and on a completely different trajectory, and it's all been positive, and I love it. So no, yeah, thanks to you, Derek. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Again, on the last episode, Chad was nice enough to share his email. If any of you want to reach out, it's Chad Chris, ChadChris 9. Was it 9?
Yep, that's it.
At gmail.com. And then feel free to give me any feedback on what you'd like to hear more on. Derek at thelifestylepractice.com. Really appreciate all of you joining and listening and being part of the journey. Again, this idea is, we're all in this together. We're all on this big rock floating in space, trying to figure out, where we want to go and what we want things to look like. And so it's fun to have a community feel where we can all learn from each other. We all have different strengths and different challenges. There's no destination. It's all journey. We're all figuring it out, and it's a lot of fun. So take care, everyone, and we will talk to you next time. Sicker than your average.